All right, so President Bola Tinubu has signed a budget of 28.78 trillion naira for the 2024 fiscal year. The president, who returned to the Aso Rock Villa from his Yuletide holiday in Lagos, conducted a brief ceremony to sign the inaugural budget of his administration. Well, the event was witnessed by top government officials, including the President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Atiku Bagudu, and the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu. Also present at the signing were his Chief of Staff, the National Chairman of the ruling All Progressives Congress, and the Chairman of the Senate Committee, that's Senate Appropriation Committee, among others. The National Assembly had passed on Saturday the 2024 appropriation bill, increasing its size from the initial proposed 27.5 trillion naira by President Bola Tinubu to 28.7 trillion naira. The budget size saw an increase of 1.2 trillion naira. For more on this, I'm joined in the studio by current affairs analyst, Professor of Communications at Baze University, right here in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you.
Okay, so we have a budget of hope. Budget of renewed hope. That's how the president refers to it. First, your thoughts on the budget and, of course, that increase of 1.2 trillion naira. Some are asking exactly how do you justify that increase? We heard from the president of the Senate that that increase actually is attributable to the issues of insecurity and, of course, school feeding program. Your thoughts?
Well, thanks for having me. I think first, maybe we should commend the government overall, for sticking to the January to December cycle that started in the former Senate President Ahmed Lawan's administration. There were fears at the time that it might be discontinued, so it's a good development that we're having a continuation of that cycle. Then secondly, budgets, as the case could be, are supposed to be installments, in the overall implementation of a national development plan. But it is first regrettable that we are having the recurrence of budget every year, and of course there's a loud silence on what our the overarching national development plan is, as the case could be. But be that as it may, it's not a bad thing if we are making projections on how we want to expend funds or income that we're expecting in the next 12 months, But beyond the expenditure, beyond the capital outlay, the recurrent outlay that the president is concerned about, which are some of the sub-themes, embedded in the overarching philosophy. Yeah. It's also the element of the fear that some of our practices are going to continue. And what are those practices? We're talking about the fact that there's no conscious effort, to block leakages. There's no commitment to how we're going to block leakages, wastages, how we're going to end profligacy, remembering that part of the budget is going to be funded through borrowing. Are we going to continue to borrow money that will be lost, through corruption, that word again, or the absence of transparency, or the lack of accountability? I would have imagined that the president will have been more definitive, on the measures that will be put in place, to check leakages. Arguments have been made in different circles.
He set up this budget monitoring committee that he says, look, we'll be ensuring that they monitor the implementation, because that seems to be where the major challenge for Nigeria's, budgeting, is. Yeah, how comforting is that for you when you hear that, this budget, the figures and what have you are there, but they're going to be monitored to the letter. He actually says he'll be monitoring every month. He'll be looking at those numbers every month.
The monitoring that I imagine they're talking about, it's performance. How well the ministries, departments, and agencies performing, and it's also nested in his speech. Where he said ministers will be measured on the basis of their performance. The speech that came earlier this morning. But beyond the performance, it's also the role that anti-corruption agencies will be playing in the matrix, or maybe we should just leave the anti-corruption agencies
be part
and focus
of that performance. I mean, if you
I
take corruption
I don't think
out
so,
of the equation to a very large extent, definitely you would expect that performance will, be much improved.
No doubt, really. We want a situation where we'll be much more prudent with resources, where profligacy, like we are still seeing around, can be a thing of the past, where wastages, can be discontinued, where leakages, can be prevented. The bulk of the funds, that is expended through the public service, are actually misapplied. If not misapplied, they are largely misappropriated, and that's a major problem affecting the proper implementation of the budget, which you earlier mentioned. It's not just about budgeting, but it's also about implementation and execution. Most of the time, yes, the plans may not necessarily, be weak or bad completely, but the deficiencies in the area of implementation, and the bane of implementation is actually diversion of resources. And this diversion happens in different areas, not just in the public sector, but of course there are different reasons in which you can say the private sector is also complicit. So what measure are we taking, or what plan is the president going to put in place, to prevent, these?
And that's a question I'd like to throw back at you. I mean, if you were on the president's team, what advice would you be giving him in terms of practical measures to be taken to plug those loopholes, minimize corruption to the barest, and
we have all the mechanisms are in place. All the anti-corruption agencies are there. The agencies.
How do you make them more effective?
The FCC is there. The ICPC is there. The police is also there. But before you even get these agencies to be activated, or before you activate them, we also need some level of attitudinal change on the part of the leaders. If we see some level of prudence, some level of maybe moderation, reduction in luxuriation, some discipline really on their part. Of course, citizens are likely to fall in line, and they also assume that it is no longer business as usual. But what we are seeing now, I'm afraid, we are not seeing anything markedly different from past practices, which has actually been very, very disturbing. A nation, that largely relies on borrowing, to fund its budget, or largely that is hugely indebted, a nation that spends the bulk of its resources on recurrent expenditure, still engaged in, different levels of aggrandizement.
Yeah, but this time, based on the figures...
It's a big regret, really. And I'm saying that if the president can be much more concerned about this attitudinal reorientation, it will help us in the sphere of implementation. Absolutely,
I agree totally. I mean, let's look at the key estimates. I mean, CapEx, capital expenditure, it's put at 10 trillion naira, recurrent expenditure 8.8 trillion. I mean, if my memory serves me right, this might just be the first time we'll be seeing a national budget where CapEx is a lot, well, maybe not that much more
but it's slightly better.
Recurrent expenditure, but it seems to be
the president
better.
Also alluded to it.
But there's debt servicing of 8.2 trillion naira, statutory transfers 1.7 trillion, and what have you.
Yeah, but what
the deficit? The president has, given himself a pat on the back that, look, deficit this time won't be as much as you had in the past. I think this is a good development in terms of trying to bring about some little improvement from what was had in the past. Where
recurrent was even much more than capital, or where we're spending a lot, in terms of servicing debt. But these were things that weren't going to take us anywhere. We're rather retrogressing, rather than developing. But if we're having some marginal increase in terms of capital expenditure versus recurrent, that's some good news, no doubt. But beyond what we have on paper, again, we'll come back to the question of implementation.
And not just implementation. My question, how do you close that budget deficit? You talk about borrowing. Of course, this government has said it will have to borrow. That's the only way. We heard from Wale Edun, the finance minister, not too long ago, saying, look, we cannot really continue to rely on borrowing. What are the other practical steps that this government can take, looking within, without necessarily, going borrowing?
Yeah, okay. Because they are both short and long-term measures. First is financial discipline.
Right.
Prudence is very, very important. What you have, make sure you spend it very well. Block leakages. We can say this for the umpteenth time. Then, of course, the short-term measures. The other day it was arrived in the news. The government is thinking of expanding its revenue base. By taxing expatriates some more, apart from away from the personal income tax that they are paying, just to show up its revenue in the immediate circumstance. But in the long-term circumstance, there are also plans. I mean, of course, we are well aware of this. It might be long-term, but at the end of the day, it might actually, resources might be coming in from these other sources in the medium term. Solid minerals is there. We're thinking of agriculture. What about steel development? Might be long-term, but of course, if we up our ante, and of course there's discipline, there's determination, it can happen in the medium term. Then of course, what about the pressure that we're having on forex from having to export crude? If the refineries come on steam, of course we expect to see local supply of PMS, which we also can help again in helping us to conserve funds, as the case could be locally. So all this coming together, with a very good synergy between the fiscal and the monetary policy. Then, of course, do not forget the macroeconomic environment as well, insecurity. If we continue to focus on that area, minimize it as much as possible in practical terms, and of course, I think we'll be heading somewhere. The situation is actually terrible, but I think that with concerted management, beyond pronouncements, we can make some mileage.
So you have hope in this budget of renewed hope. I'm not sure you addressed the issue of the additional 1.2 trillion naira to the budget. Originally, it was 27.5 trillion.
It's not a new development. We keep saying
it's not new, but is it right? And the reasons were being given. I mean, are they justifiable? On the one hand, we're told that, look, because of the prevailing, the value of the naira that keeps going south, and then you hear from the Senate President that it has to do with security, of course, and school feeding program. 1.2 trillion.
That's a lot of money, but like I said, it's not a new development, and of course, these are projections. There's no certainty that the money is going to be expended. It's all dependent on the revenue that comes in. Again, we've also had complaints, from the military or from the security agencies of shortage of funds, and that's why they are incapacitated in combating the many problems, that we have around that sector. If the funds are available and if the funds are well applied, and we can see, result at the end of the day, I'm not sure we want to worry about how much they increase the budget by. But the problem again is just the fear that we have over time. That sometimes when these increases come, they are not necessarily for the benefit of the people. It's just an arrangement for some people to help themselves. If that is not the case, then I think we might just allow it to go. Okay.
We have to leave it there. Thank you so much. I'll still keep you for the next discussion, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. You're watching Arise Prime Time. I am Ngozi Alebu. President Bola Tinubu, in his first New Year broadcast, offered Nigerians hope of a new dawn, stating that all the difficult decisions he had taken since assuming office were in the overall interests of the country. While the president highlighted challenges faced in 2023 and having laid the groundwork of an economic recovery plan, promised Nigerians to accelerate the pace of service delivery across the nation. Well, I still have with me in the studio the current affairs analyst and professor of communications at Baze University, Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Thank you again for staying with us on this one. Let me quote Shehu Sani, Senator Shehu Sani. It says, Tinubu's New Year's speech is like a native doctor's words of hope to a sick man. End quote. Let me get your thoughts on all you heard from President Tinubu this morning on his New Year message. Did it inspire any level of inspiration? Did it inspire hope that indeed there's something good to look forward to in 2024 as far as deliverables by this government is concerned?
Well, I think it's a good development, first and foremost, that we're having the president address us at the beginning of the year. Previously, if I remember correctly, the practice is just for the president to issue a goodwill message, to send a goodwill message. But now he came out to address us, perhaps to provide the necessary inspiration, galvanize us towards plans ahead, And of course, he was right on some targets. He struck some chord necessarily, even though there were missing links. Of course, talking about, he mentioned refineries. Then, of course, he repeated the question of hope. But the problem I have is that the mouthing, the emphasis on hope is becoming slightly jaded,
Right.
We need to move to a level where we can begin to see the realization of hope, because hope shouldn't be a concept or a term that will be used in a vacuum. How do we begin to see...
sorry to butt in there. Before we came on, in the newsroom, we're trying to define exactly what hope is or what hope means. And one of my colleagues, Omo, actually said, look, the dictionary meaning of hope is wishful thinking. Now on the scoring renewed hope, as in renewed wishful thinking, is that what it is?
No, it's not. It's not hope.
Just to throw that in.
Hope is actually deeper.
Right.
Hope is about making rightful projections and imagining that they're going to be implemented. Hope is capable of boosting the human psychology towards the realization of set objectives.
Right.
It's a fundamental concept that have attracted the attention of even deep thinkers, philosophers in history. The tragedy of our situation is that we sometimes use it carelessly, and in using it, yes, it's okay to use it, but we have to see at some point, the realization or similar pointers to the fact that the things that we hope for will definitely come to materialization. Okay,
let's itemize some of the things to hope for. Reliable supply of electricity. We heard that from the president. Restart local refining of petroleum. I mean, the Port Harcourt refinery, we're told, with a 210,000 capacity will soon, take off. And of course, the Dangote refinery that we've been waiting for. Boost food supply, that will have to do with security. If you fix security, of course, food supply will be there. Boost local and foreign investments. Let's narrow it down to that. In 2023, a number of multinationals left the country. Sanofi and what have you. Way too many. It's a long list.
Very unfortunate.
And the president has said, look, he's going to plug all the loopholes that make business difficult in Nigeria. Where does it need to start from very quickly?
Deal with insecurity.
Right.
And then, of course, create the necessary environment, that will stimulate the economy further. And how do you do this? Just make sure that foreign investors are able to access their funds whenever they need it. What level of assurance is it going to give them? And most of them are still struggling, and a lot of them are threatening to leave. The airlines have threatened. Emirates is no longer flying. The last time I checked, and some more have also said that they are likely to leave. What are the conditions?
Concerns that they want to convert their businesses to a more import-based, businesses in Nigeria Should that even be allowed by this government?
With the kind of situation that we're in, because we cannot be too choosy, we cannot be too decisive on what we're going to allow and what we will not ordinarily allow. Do not forget that the president has been up and about, traveling from one country to the other in search for foreign investment.
Yeah, but
however,
many are saying,
can
you ensure that those investments that are here don't take off, don't leave?
But maybe we should also create a silver lining. It's not only in Nigeria. Sometimes some of these companies are not leaving because it's just Nigeria alone. They're also exiting some other countries.
African
it might just be as a matter of changing business plans, But we do know that our situation is there. Our situation is unsuitable for some kind of investment or the sustenance of some investment. We do know we have to work on it. But I think we shouldn't necessarily be too hard on ourselves in terms of how some of these companies are also living. There's hope in the fact that we have had indications of people going by presidential pronouncement, also saying that they're coming to invest in us. The other day, they told us that 14 billion is being expected from India. There are also projections from Saudi Arabia, 6 billion, if I'm right. And
of course, the Siemens
and on like Germany. that. So these are the kind of hope, the lines of hope that we can continue to explore, irrespective of the many downsides around, exiting of companies.
We'll leave it on that hopeful note. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, Baze University, right here in Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us.